All right, so welcome to Unit 4, Week 4. This is another week-long unit. We'll be talking about visual impairment and blindness and how it affects learning and development. This week, there's a few readings. There's a link on Canvas to the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. They have a page that's dedicated to how visual impairments and blindness affect learning. It's a great resource. I've also uploaded Chapter 3 of Braga and Aaron's book called Visual Impairment and Learning. It's a great resource, so it's there on Canvas for you. I've also asked you to read Chapter 12 of the Foundations book. It's on motivation, and you might be wondering, what does motivation have to do with development and learning? Well, motivation often comes up when we talk about development and learning. For instance, a typically sighted peer, a baby who's typically sighted, has the motivation, we say, to reach out and grab that toy because they see it. They see the toy, so they reach out and grab it. When they reach out and grab this toy, they are building muscle tone and they're working on fine motor skills, and it helps them learn to roll over, and they start meeting all these physical milestones. So when we say that a student or a baby who has a visual impairment doesn't see that toy, sometimes we can say they're not motivated to meet these milestones. And the idea of motivation with our students happens in other areas as well. Sometimes I've heard people say a student who's sitting by themselves doesn't have the motivation to make friends. They don't have the motivation to play on the playground. And this idea of motivation is very intertwined with learning and development. And this chapter is great because it puts motivation back into the laps of us as educators. And it asks us, what are we doing to provide the motivation for our students to meet these milestones and learn and develop? So it's a great chapter. There's also a discussion board. Please remember to post your initial discussion by Wednesday and respond meaningfully to at least 2 of your peers. All right, so the biggest impact, there's several impacts, but the biggest impact is visual impairments has on learning is incidental learning. So much we know about the world we learn through our vision. Nobody explicitly taught us about it. We just learned because we saw it. So our students with any degree of visual impairment will have deficits in incidental learning. So here's a picture. It's a little boy. He's probably about 4 or 5 years old, and he's peering into a sewer grate. And so obviously no one said, hey, check out this sewer grate in the middle of the street. This is just something he's learning on his own. He discovered it. He's learning on his own. And so think about all the learning he's getting from this. I mean, he's checking out what's going on down there. And our kids, if so many of our kids, if they're not explicitly taught about things, they are missing out on so much incidental learning. They definitely need that supplemented. And then they have huge deficits in cognitive development and concept development. And so how does this deficit in concept development affect their cognitive development? And everything we know about life builds on it itself. And so when you struggle with concept development, you will struggle in other areas. This also impacts their performance on standardized assessments, and their performance on assessments really displays their holes, their gaps in their knowledge, especially when tests are given. The questions assume about what kids should know. And I'll give you an example. I had a student a few years ago, and I had to give her the state assessment, and one of the questions she was supposed to read about, I think it was called Country Mouse and City Mouse, and she was supposed to answer these comprehension questions, and it was supposed to be an assessment about her reading ability. And in reality, there were so many questions that required her concept, her knowledge about these concepts, that she was really lacking. So I'm afraid she did very poorly on that, although she was a great reader. She couldn't answer the questions because she didn't have this knowledge that other kids who have all this incidental learning have. And so this lack of incidental learning, we really need to supplement that with hands-on experiences. These are very, very important. And I actually found this on the internet. I thought it was great. And the left side of the slide says hands-on experiences are essential for building concept development. And the right side is a picture of a little boy. He's toddler, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and it says hands-on learning about bees. And he's on one side of the picture, he's building a puzzle and he's learning about the different parts of the bee. And another picture shows him exploring a plastic model of a bee and a honeycomb. And it looks like the honeycomb has got little plastic things that look like maybe honey, representations of honey. And then right above that, I think it's a picture of him, and he's actually got a bee in his hand. And I think, how great, right? I'm not sure about the bee specifically, but something like this for a variety of subjects. Think about all the things that our kids require without ever seeing a bee. These are the kind of experiences you really need to have to understand a bee, to understand really anything. Without sight, we really need those tactile experiences, those multisensory experiences. So here's an example of this. Is a picture of a baby, and he's got toys all around him, and this is what I was talking about earlier. This child is using his vision. The parent or the service provider is using the child's vision to motivate them to build their muscle tone and their motor skills, and they've put toys all around them. A child with vision or with a limited vision doesn't have that visual reference to see that a toy is over there, so they may really have deficits in motor development. So they will more than likely have delays in meeting those developmental milestones without some early intervention in place to supplement that motivation. Provide a different kind of motivation. Students with visual impairments may also have low muscle tone if they're not provided with that supplementary opportunities. So sometimes you'll see kids have low muscle tone. I worked with a student who had a really hard time sitting up because she'd get exhausted by the end of the day. She wasn't used to sitting up. We actually sit up and look around because our vision gives us a lot of information, and so that's why we keep our head up. Without vision, a lot of times you'll see kids who are blind or visually impaired really hold their head down. And so this particular student, she had a hard time going the whole day sitting up. She wasn't used to sitting up, and she lacked the strength. Within a few hours sitting at school, she'd be very exhausted. So there'll be deficits in motor skill development without supplemental learning. Visual impairments and blindness also affect social skills and play skill development. So, and here's a picture of a man, and he's helping his toddler. She's blind and she's holding a cane. He's helping her learn to hold a cane. And I picked this picture because she's got her head down. And it's so classic of our kids. When they walk, they keep their head down. And so we really need to keep telling them, providing those cues, keep your head up, keep your head up. They almost have to be trained to keep their head up because they don't have the vision. They don't really have a reason to keep their head up, really. But for social skills, it's very important to teach kids to look in the direction of the person that's talking to you and keep your head up so they someone will talk to them and the conversation will go well. They have the social skills to build those relationships. It also affects, limited vision also affects their access to nonverbal communication. So much communication is nonverbal communication that our students will need the instruction to listen to auditory cues, the inflection of someone's voice, but also just to build the social skills that they might lack in that other kids might learn through modeling. Limited vision also affects their ability to learn through imitation. So on the right I have a picture of a ballet class, and of course the little girls, they're learning ballet because their teachers are showing them the movements and they're imitating those movements. Our kids need to have a lot of physical prompting so that they know exactly how they should move. And this goes for really anything. Students often have problems with running and they need explicit instructions on how to move their arms when they run. That's a physical milestone that they're having difficulty meeting, but it also affects their play skill development and how they socialize on the playground, how they're able to access the playground equipment. That visual impairment can really affect their social and skill play development. All right, so the only assignment you have this week is on the discussion board. And I think I already said please post by Wednesday. So have a great week. Thanks.